It's my pleasure to introduce a renowned surgical oncologist, researcher, professor, and administrator, a friend, Peter Pisters, Dr. Peter Pisters, who established his career at MD Anderson. We talked about it a long time ago. It was between Memorial and Sloan Kettering. You had so many opportunities, and you served 20 years as faculty member and medical director, and you participated to the expansion of the MD Anderson in the metropolitan area. And you left MD Anderson to return to Canada as CEO of the University Health Network in Toronto, largest research hospital. And in 2017, you couldn't resist. You came back, returned to Houston, and helping us right now making cancer history. Thank you, Peter. Peter graduated from a small medical school just like me. We feel the same in Western Ontario, in London, Ontario. And he's been inspired by the patient care, and this has been very impactful as a preparation is had for his role currently as president. And Dr. Pisters is focused and resilient. His favorite procedures as surgeon, because we did many procedures together. It's not only gastrectomy, simple gastrectomy, but it's gastrectomy with a thoracic component. It's a sarcoma with involvement of the vena cava. It's a duodenopancreatectomy with the desmoplastic reaction, as you noted in your up notes, from radiation. So, you have cultivated this, leadership culture, and you have championed at MD Anderson continuous growth for employees and focus on diversity. You have all the CEO accolades, and they are new to me. Glassdoor, top CEO by Glassdoor, ranked third among 100 leaders on the Employees' Choice Award for the top CEO in 2021. You have been honored in 2021 as a CEO Communicator of the Year. And we know you communicate with weekly emails to everyone, methodical and organized emails that are not necessarily top-down news you don't want to hear, but they range from AI to multiple other topics of interest, and they are educational as well, I think. So, Peter, last thing, Peter, Dr. Pisters has a great sense of humor, and particularly when he speaks with his high school French and a Canadian accent. Thank you, Peter. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Let me jump in for the benefit of everybody here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you, and hopefully can share a little bit of the insights and the things that I've learned along the way, along a remarkable journey of my own, but most importantly, one for MD Anderson. Here's what I'd like to cover in my comments today. For those of you that are not as familiar with MD Anderson, a brief review. Then some of the lessons I've learned along the way, and then hopefully you'll be able to see how those have been applied for the benefit of our institution and some of the outcomes that we've seen in the short time that I've been in this role. So an excellent jumping off point for all of us in understanding MD Anderson is our mission statement. Those of you who come from academic medicine will be very familiar with the three legs of the stool: patient care, research, and education. But to that, we add prevention. And in many ways, we'd love to put ourselves out of business through the science of prevention and implementation science that hopefully could eliminate cancer altogether, and in some ways put ourselves completely out of business. Here are some fast facts that should anchor your understanding of MD Anderson. Just about a $6 billion organization. with an important $1.1 billion annual investment in research that I'll come to in a few slides. 24,000 employees solely focused on ending cancer, and the largest cancer clinical trials unit in the world, something that is very important to our societal contributions. When we think about our impact, it can be measured in many geographies. First, in Houston, with our Texas Medical Center campus, with 5 Houston area campuses that allow us to distribute care across the large metropolitan area. And then across the state, in a variety of ways that we're working on right now, primarily through community outreach and engagement, but increasingly and hopefully by expanding our capabilities in other cities across Texas. The national network that we have with a series of partners that allows us to extend our clinical trials and our mission strategically across geography. And then the global work that we're doing now that I'll talk more about that comes in 2 large frames through partnerships with NGOs like the World Health Organization and through partnerships with government, where the conversation is related to cancer control in entire countries. Now, along the way, I've served institutions in a variety of different roles for a long time, and very importantly for me today, as an academic surgeon, binding me to groups like this and to patients and to trainees in very impactful ways. And then in a variety of administrative roles that you heard about earlier from Nick, leading up to where I am at the moment. Now, one of the points that we were talking about just a few moments ago is the era that we're in right now. And when we look at some of the challenges that lay ahead for academic medicine, they're summarized in some of these bullet points, really relating to the solvency of the Medicare trust fund, important aspects of the era that we're in right now with artificial intelligence. I think that the era that we are in now for the last 4 to 5 months is like the introduction of the World Wide Web, and the experience that we're having today with ChatGTP is equivalent to the first time you ever used a browser. And I think our lives in clinical medicine and research will be dramatically changed by artificial intelligence. We're seeing tremendous challenges related to cybersecurity due to nation states and organized crime that create risks for academic medicine. We're experiencing tremendous shifts in the labor market related to the pandemic effects and the impact that that has on licensed professionals, especially and importantly nurses. And then I think we need to think about the social contract that defines academic medicine, the education and research that we do, and what the future of that is in the context of the pressures that we will be facing. And so I think one of the most important points for all of us to really think about is that the organizations that will thrive in the next 10 to 20 years will be those that have exceptional leadership, that are prepared for a lot of these challenges and have the teams and the capabilities to navigate the road ahead. Now, one of the most important things that I've learned along the way is that if you go on a journey like many of us have, from individual contributor all the way over to leader or executive, certain skill sets assume different degrees of importance. Early on, as an individual contributor, technical skills related to your job function are obviously very important. As you move into a manager role, it becomes more important that you know how to supervise people and how to support them and how to develop them over time. And then if you move to the far right, other skills become predominant. Vision, influence, interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, communication ability, strategic thinking become very, very important. And arguably, the MD Anderson people here are less concerned about whether I was a good doctor or a capable surgeon. And they're more focused on whether I have the skills that I've listed on the right side, because those are essential to my role at this moment in time. Now, one thing that I think surgeons understand is that in many ways, we're uniquely positioned to be leaders. We work in teams, and we've always worked in teams. We appreciate what others bring to the table. We know what anesthesia, critical care, infectious diseases, ICUs provide in the care of our patients. We know we can't do it alone. We're used to making decisions with incomplete information because that's what we do in the middle of the night. And I think that that really prepares us in many ways for the acquisition of additional skills that can be added to those that we have intrinsically as surgeons and can be integrated into leadership skills that become very, very important. Now, along the way, some of the things that I've learned that I think are very important. Now, first of all, this requires continuous training. And it wouldn't surprise any of you, perhaps, to know that I continue to read on elements of leadership all the time, because I need to really educate myself on a continuous basis. Certain business and leadership skills are very, very important. And you can't do these types of jobs without the ability to understand corporate finance or accounting principles. They end up being very, very important. The power of networks is super important. Let me illustrate that with just one anecdote. Along the way, like many of you, I work to maintain my network. And it came to my attention through my sister-in-law, who's in Toronto, that my predecessor at University Health Network was moving on to become the Deputy Minister of Health. And I sent him an email, a single email. It was about 2 lines long, that said the following: Dear Bob, I heard, congratulations, stay in touch, Peter. I send 4 or 5 of those every week. And he replied 30 minutes later saying, thanks so much, Peter. Are you interested in the job? One email changed my life. 8 months later, I was the CEO in Toronto. So networking is really, really important. The art and science of communication, exceedingly important, because in organizations, communication builds trust, and trust is the currency of leadership. And so, as you heard Nick say, I am personally invested in making sure that our organization hears from me and they understand not only what we are doing, but why we are doing it and how we're going to do it. One of the most important things that we try to project, that I have learned along the way, is that a lot of what I know is wrong. And I simply need to be able to unlearn and relearn over time. And so listening and the ability to reframe my thinking is very, very important. My own philosophy is summarized in these bullets. Some of the most important elements of it is the need to have a strong moral compass and the importance of everyone in the organization understanding my commitment to integrity. When everyone understands that, when that's not in doubt, then decisions are understood to be made on the basis of facts, best facts available, and they are made in the interest of what is best for the institution. Emotional intelligence ends up being super important. The good news for all of us is that it's not genetically determined, like IQ. You can work on it, and your ability to recognize and regulate your own emotions is a powerful predictor of what kind of leader you are. Now, along the way, there are a couple important concepts that I've learned that are illustrated in these set points. The first one is that as a leader, you need to find the set point between confidence and humility. You can't be dialed over to one end of this spectrum or the other. You have to find a sweet spot in the middle here that does not represent overconfidence or arrogance and is not really dialed all the way over to humility, because the people that you lead want to see an element of confidence, but they don't want to see overconfidence. It's also important in going into meetings with stakeholder groups that you define your set point on this scale. There's some meetings that I go to which are all the way over to ask and listen. I'm there to learn and to make sure that people can understand that I'm listening and that I understand their perspective. Other kinds of meetings that I'm in are all the way over to tell and persuade. And almost always I'm going into a meeting saying, where am I on this scale for this meeting? And it varies depending on the stakeholder group and the context and the agenda of the meeting. So these are 2 important principles to carry forward. Now, when I think about my own personal actions, they're summarized on this slide. I think of myself as the chief reading officer for the organization. That really involves me making sure that I'm reading what I'm supposed to be reading to guide the institution forward, to understand the current status of a variety of different risks that the organization faces, and to be able to forward elements of that to the right people at the right time in the right way. I also need to model the way for self-care in the environment of burnout that is impacting the entire sector of healthcare. And if they don't see their leader engaging in self-care, then they don't believe it's really important. So people really need to understand that this is important to me in a variety of different ways that are outlined here. Important aspects of listening and learning I've already talked about. And probably one of the most impactful things for me is on the far right of this slide, the importance of self-reflection. At the end of every day, I take about 20 minutes to sit down and replay the day. And that allows me to go back through the series of events, the meetings that I've been at, to evaluate what I said or what I didn't say, and to go back and say, what can I learn from that to be better, to be more effective tomorrow? And so that self-reflection is super important. It usually results in some notes made in red pen that are given to my chief of staff that really help us to move the organization forward on the basis of self-reflection. So now a few things about MD Anderson. This is really what we are assembling together, these puzzle pieces, the strategic plan, the master facilities framework, a financial plan that allows for investments in the strategy and in the environment, and then a comprehensive philanthropic campaign, which is very important to MD Anderson's future. Now, let's just talk for a few minutes about the planning process. We actually used a planning process that comes from business, from Fortune 50 businesses, from Roger Martin, who's a thought leader, who's dean of a business school at the University of Toronto. He wrote this book called Playing to Win with A.G. Lafley at the time when A.G. Lafley was CEO of P&G. And this framework that we used a series of these nested questions. And it starts with, what is our winning aspiration for MD Anderson people? That was easy. End cancer. We got question one instantly. But the other questions are more challenging when you look at where will we play? How will we win? And then very importantly, this planning framework places tremendous emphasis on capabilities and management systems. And we spent about 40% of the planning time talking about the capabilities and management systems that were required to execute the strategy. If you don't think about how you're going to do the work, you won't be able to do the work. And many strategic plans sit on a shelf in a binder. Nobody goes back to them because they didn't really think about the execution framework or the management systems or capabilities that are required to execute the strategy. Now, important aspects of the planning are that we didn't do it in a terrarium in Houston. We took into account a lot of externalities that really impact organizations and academic medicine. Of course, we took into account many aspects of the national healthcare landscape that all of us are familiar with that impact MD Anderson and the institutions across America. We took into account many aspects that are unique to our own state, Texas. Texas is on a pathway to go from where we sit right now, 29 million to 45 million. And when we have 45 million residents quite soon, we're going to have a lot of cancer, a lot of pediatric cancer, and we're going to have to really think about how we meet the needs of that population. That reality related to the demography of Texas is really driving many aspects of our strategy, as the MD Anderson people here know. We need to think about many aspects that are societal factors, like our carbon footprint, the future of work, something that we talk about a lot at MD Anderson, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that impacts the workforce in a setting where the majority of our workforce now is under the age of 46. So we have a lot of people that are not of our generation that we need to plan for in the future. And when we were going through the strategic planning process a few years ago, I said to the teams in the meetings that I was in, make plans for people that are in middle school right now, because those are the ones that we need to be thinking about. Not you. The middle schoolers are the ones that we're planning for. We also were planning for a lot of the accelerated pace of innovation that you see on the right-hand side, include what we now describe as generative AI, the importance of data science, and new aspects of science that really impact cancer research. Now, when we went through the planning process, we used two approaches. One was in-person strategy sessions, and then we used a crowdsourcing methodology. And when you look at this, it enabled us to really engage thousands of people at MD Anderson. The verb that we use internally to describe the planning process is co-creation, because we created the plan. In fact, thousands of MD Anderson people worked together on the plan. And you can see in the lower right, the crowdsourcing strategies that we use to get ideas right from the front lines. So we could have a nurse at the end of the shift complete a fill-in-the-blank statement online that basically says, MD Anderson needs a way to blank so that we can blank, but today blank. And when you aggregate that, you can understand what the barriers are and where the opportunities are. And you can integrate a lot of the ideas that come right from the front lines into the plan. And when frontline individuals see their ideas reflected in the plan, you can get traction on the back end. That ends up being super important. Now, as we went through the planning process, this graph turned out to be super important. This appears on page 8 of our strategic plan, and it outlines what we're trying to do. The aim statement at the top really describes what we're trying to do with the plan and with 24,000 working together. And we're seeking to get into the upper outer quadrant of this graph. In settings, we're doing strategic planning, which by definition requires sometimes binary decisions, and you're trying to decide between A and B. When we could transparently plot A and B on the graph, we could choose option B because it's in the upper outer quadrant, and we could go to the stakeholders behind option A and say, we're going with B, here's why. And when you do that in a way that's transparent, and you do it in a way that's data-driven, and you're clear about the intent, people understand, based on this graph, what we're here to do. We also use this graph in other important ways, especially and importantly for us. We recognize the talent dependency of our strategic plan, and we're using this graph for hiring in a way that we can hire with what we describe as impact-oriented hiring. So now, as it relates to hiring cancer researchers, as an example, we have a cross-functional team from different groups in the organization that rank orders high-profile scientists from around the world, scores them, and then we say we're going to go after the top 5%. And then after we land them, we'll figure out which academic department they might fit in. That's totally different to the way that universities hire faculty. And really what we have done is to create impact-oriented hiring because we understand and we recognize the talent dependency of our strategic plan and the need that we have to attract gifted and talented people. So this graph, which has been shown hundreds of times internally at MD Anderson, is a huge driver of so many things that we do as an organization. Now, the plan is really summarized in many ways in this slide. It shows the 3 themes, which are described by single words that are easily understandable by 24,000: reach, breakthroughs, and value. To some extent, they're self-explanatory. And these 3 themes are mapped to 23 specific decisions that we made as an organization. What's important to know as we did this is that these themes, a couple of things are important. Number one, they are timeless. And you might understand why we're never going to stop trying to extend our reach. We're always going to be seeking breakthroughs for cancer patients and constantly striving to increase our high-touch, high-value care for the benefit of patients. The good news about the timelessness of this is that we won't have to do it again anytime soon, and we can substitute among these 23 decisions because this degree of alignment and these 3 themes really reflect so much of what we are doing. That is why the strategic plan is known in our organization not as Strategy 2028. It's not known as the McKinsey plan. We didn't have a consulting firm come in and do something to us. We did it ourselves. We co-created the plan. That's why internally it's branded as our strategy with uppercase O, uppercase S, and it's definitely not known as Peter's plan. So that is super important to our ability to execute on the back end. Now, I won't go through all 23 decisions, but I will highlight 2 of them that give you an illustration of the impact that we're already having. one of the decisions we made about international programming is that we wanted to partner with NGOs like the WHO. We felt that when we brought our unique capabilities related to cancer control together with the infrastructure that the WHO has, we could have greater impact than other approaches that we've used in the past for international programming. So we just announced a few months ago a partnership with the WHO designed to focus on cervical cancer and breast cancer all around the world. That's Kathleen Schmaler, one of our gynecologic oncologists, signing the agreement with the WHO. And we are so proud of this relationship and the potential that it has in a variety of underdeveloped countries in the world. On the breakthroughs side, we launched two really important institutes. The first is the James P. Allison Institute, focused, as you might imagine, on immuno-oncology and its role in cancer therapeutics. That is already launched and well off the ground, receiving tremendous amounts of scientific interest, has an external advisory board that helps guide and shape its future. And we are building and launching a data science institute in oncology under the leadership of Dr. David Jaffrey. And that will enable us to really track in a number of areas that are important to our future, including artificial intelligence and data science. So these two institutes are what I call professionally managed institutes. What I mean by that is that they report to me. We oversee the resource allocation. We have external advisory boards made up of industry and academic partners that evaluate the work coming from the institutes. And we have them linked to our comprehensive philanthropic campaign in very important ways. So let's talk about the environment, which is so important to us. One of the most important things that we're doing in the Texas Medical Center is really rebuilding the environment almost completely through the TMC. And you're seeing some images from projects that we have underway right now. On the top left is a new research building designed by Elkis Manfredi, a architecture firm out of Boston. On the top right is a rendering of a mid-campus project at MD Anderson involving industry partners, ourselves, Texas A&M, and UT Health Sciences Center. You're seeing a rendering of the landscape, and you're seeing a drone shot on the left of some of the cranes that are in the air right now as this project comes out of a 37-acre parking lot to create an industry academic campus for us. Now, here's a summary table that shows a lot of the projects that we have underway right now or in the planning phase for the Texas Medical Center and for our regional environment in metropolitan Houston. And I would just draw your attention to the fact that these are split between the clinical and research missions with 4 important clinical projects and 4 specific research projects that are really important to our future. And now some of the important points here are the construction dates. You can see that 3 of the projects are under construction right now. And you look at the start dates in 2023, or 2025 or 2026 for these projects. And you can see that the MD Anderson people who are here today will be watching massive transformation occurring at the TMC and demolition of many of the outdated facilities at the institution that are definitely beyond their best buy dates. So the TMC campus is going to completely change over the next decade because of the planning that took place on the back end of the strategic plan. It's really important that the facilities match the strategy, not the other way around. Now, a big part of our future is our ability to galvanize support from people who are behind us. And we have been in what is called the quiet phase of our capital campaign. You can see that our ability to raise funds has increased year after year, despite challenges in equity markets that you may be personally familiar with. This year, we're going to exceed our targets by about 30%. We hope to reach the 1 billion mark within a year and a half, and then we will have an open phase of this capital campaign that will take us to a planned target of 2.5 billion. That is 2.5 times what MD Anderson raised in its last capital campaign, which was completed in 2011. A lot of this really involves us understanding the principles of philanthropy something that the institution has really not been exposed to for a long time, but something that we will teach during the course of this capital campaign, so that when we get to the next capital campaign, something I'm thinking about a lot now, we will really be ready to take off. Now, I want to share in my closing slides just a few outcomes that illustrate the impact that we're having right now. There are a few key performance indicators that really summarize where we are right now. There are 4 big ones that are really, really important to us in defining where the organization sits right now. One is the financial metric of operating cash flow, which is really important. This number really funds our entire building program and many aspects of the investments that we make. And you can see that at 15%, the operating cash flow is very robust for academic medicine. We have a 3.4% operating margin at about $129 million. That puts us in the top tier of academic institutions across the country. That is due to incredible hard work, and it is due to a core value of stewardship that we inserted during the strategic planning process. Our teams know that that means a disciplined approach to expense management, and that's put us on very, very strong financial footing. The third metric that is super important is brand valuation, and we repeat it every 3 years using rigorous third-party methodology. In 2016, just before I started, this was measured at $3.2 billion. And when we launched the strategic plan, we remeasured it. So we had a baseline at the moment that we launched the strategic plan. And that independent evaluation was $5.3 billion. If you actually care about brand value like our team does, then thousands of decisions flow immediately as a result of that. From the faculty that you hire, to the buildings that you build, to the architects that you choose, the focus you place on service excellence, all of those decisions are predicated on the reality that we care about brand. And I've told our team, we should be able to drive the brand valuation into 11-figure range. That's what we're here to do. Just to give you some context, Nike is $35 billion. So we have a ways to go. But we have an amazing team. And if you look at the momentum that we have right now, even before we launched the strategic plan, we had moved the needle from 3.2 to 5.3. This is something that we will repeat every 3 years, so that we can really measure our progress. And if we're managing the organization properly, the brand value should increase. The last thing that's very important to me, and our team knows this, is employee engagement. It is really, really important that we have a workforce that has an emotional connection to the institution and our mission. We sit right now at the 93rd percentile, which is really unbelievable. When I started, we were at the 70th percentile. We took it from 70 to 80 from 2017 to 2019. From 2019 to 2021, we took it to 89. Then, of course, we were in the middle of the pandemic. Our third-party vendors said, get ready. It's going to look really bad. Every institution looks really, really bad right now. And we went from 89 to 93. I'm just so proud of our team. It says a lot about how we came together during a pandemic. Now, a couple things that are important. Here's the executive summary from our 2023. This is from February 2023 employee engagement survey. First of all, we had over 20,000 of our employees participate. That's very important because you get rich data when everyone participates, and you get a lot of insights from that data when you use the methodology that we use, which is confidential, non-anonymous. What that means is that you have to put in your employee ID number, and when you put your employee ID number in, we know your gender, we know what work unit you're assigned to, we know who your manager is, we know what generation you come from, and the data are super accurate. That really helps us over time. So on the good news frame, we saw the engagement scores that put us at the 93rd percentile across institutions in America. We saw something that is really important to all of us, clarity of direction. That's perhaps a byproduct of a simple, understandable strategic plan, and the reality that people in our organization really understand what we're here to do, and they understand how the plan will help us to accomplish that. Remarkably, we saw a reduction in burnout. as an organization. That doesn't mean that we have burnout solved, and we will be working hard in a variety of ways to make sure that we can look at the antidote to burnout, which is wellness, and drive that into excellence at MD Anderson. So we have a lot of work to do, but we're moving in the right direction. On the areas where we need to place more attention, we have survey effectiveness, resources and support, and change management. These are byproducts of the degree to which the organization is dynamic. It is very important that we're moving the organization, that we're changing it, because static organizations die. It is really, really important. Each one of these domains has what I call a manager dependence. And it is very important to us that we help managers to explain how we use the survey over time, that we use the survey to make important decisions at the top of the organization, and we make decisions that should come from the bottom up at the unit level and be customized for individual circumstances in individual units in the organization. On the top of the organization, as a direct result of the survey, we have made major changes at MD Anderson. In 2017, when I came back, one of the first things that we did was to create a leadership institute, because leadership showed up on the survey as a significant issue at MD Anderson at all levels. Now our leadership institute is award-winning, nationally ranked, as a result of that. 2019 showed up. Mentoring was an issue at MD Anderson. We put in world-class mentoring programs. Showed up on this survey when people said, we have good mentoring programs. Thank you so much. 2021, benefits showed up. One of the things that we put into place, amazingly, but this is Texas, parental leave. That showed up as a significant issue. There are certain people in Austin, Texas that believe that we should have the same benefits at MD Anderson as the Department of Motor Vehicles. I'm not one of those people, but I had to make a case in Austin for why MD Anderson was unique, why we needed parental leave. We got it. And now I get emails every week with pictures of babies from our employees who are thanking us for putting those changes in place. So we make major changes based on the employee opinion survey, and it's very important for our workforce to understand that. Now, when I think about the key drivers of culture at MD Anderson, I think about them in these three domains: leadership, professionalism, and wellness. We have to excel in each of these. And we're at different places on the timeline. I talked a moment ago about our Leadership Institute. Now it's nationally recognized and award-winning. We're putting in a professionalism program at MD Anderson because that really governs how people act and behave. If you have great leaders and people behave politely, you have an amazing organization. And if you really stamp out behaviors that don't belong in an organization like ours, because you have to recognize that what you permit, you promote. And so we are going back to the workforce saying, we have a certain set of expectations, and we're going to hold you accountable to professional behavior. And when you do that, everyone has a better time at work. And we're going to be working on wellness so that I want us to be nationally ranked leaders in leadership, in professionalism, and wellness. And when we have those three things, as evolved today as Leadership Institute, our culture will be absolutely unbeatable. So this is my next to last slide, and it shows the impact of our breakthroughs strategic theme. We understand that there's a social contract that we're part of that is very important for us to be really producing outputs to benefit humanity. And when we look at these three scientific meetings, the AACR, ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, and the American Society of Hematology, you can see the trend in abstracts coming from MD Anderson faculty. To us, that is one of the first outputs that we see. It's an early signal that our breakthroughs theme is accomplishing many of the goals that we had. Now, when we look at how that translates over time into impact, you can see that in the IP that's created with 45 patents issued in the last year that we have now complete data from the patent office. In the FDA oncology drug approvals, when we're going to the FDA 29 times in 1 year, basically 2 times every month. That is really impacting patients and changing treatment paradigms across the country. So when we look at this, we see this as an early signal that the work that we're doing to reorganize, the work that we're doing to sharpen focus, the work that we're doing to create the right environment, recruit the right talent, is having the kind of impact that we're seeking. So here's my last slide with a few summary points. I think one of the most important things, hopefully, that you can take away from my comments today are that technical skills are just not enough. You really need another skill set, and you need to work on refining that skill set constantly over time. That requires you to be aware of your own gaps. And I didn't really get into that during the conversation, but when I moved into medical director and VP roles, I became acutely aware of all the things I didn't know. And I worked hard to try to close those gaps to the greatest extent possible. Networking is super important. Networking is not brown-nosing. Networking is developing relationships that advance your career and help your part of the organization to develop the connections that are important to your patients. I gave you my own networking story so you can remember one email changed my life. It is really, really important. Once you build trust, and it's not so easy to do in organizations, you need to really understand how important it is to maintain that. It can be easily broken. And that's something that we talk about all the time because that trust ends up being so important. It is the currency of leadership. It does allow you to make changes rapidly in an organization if people trust you. One of the most important assets that we have are our people. MD Anderson is really not about infrastructure. It's about people. And we are so invested in making sure that we have the right people, that they understand what it is that we are doing. They understand what their role is in executing our strategy. And when that happens, you can really accomplish unbelievably aspirational goals. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today.
To introduce you to this small token of appreciation, thank you so much